Hey Onlinedela, I thought I would just go ahead and make a video in response, and all I can do is tell you how I handle the questions that you've brought up, and maybe some of it will be helpful to you. Um, so I've got your Slack message here, so I'm just going to kind of read through it and respond and show you on my screen some of the ways I handle it. Um, so you're wanting to tighten up productivity systems and processes, which is a perennial issue for me as well, and what I've been working on for the last couple decades, I guess. So I don't know, they're not tight enough yet. Still more work to be done, but I can tell you and show you kind of a snapshot of where I am right now, and everything is always in flux for me, trying to make things better. So you said two critical things. First, you don't want to lose anything that you've captured to do, which tends to happen when you move timing sensitive items around the forever calendar in my daily agenda. That is something I think, at least for me, I have tightened up. So almost never do I lose anything. But on the other hand, I don't use a calendar. And so I don't move things around a calendar. I operate on a Scrum system, which has its own calendar and then houses all of the decisions about what you're going to be working on it through the Scrum processes. So unless once I get something that actually has a calendar event, like a meeting, I'll put that on my Google Calendar. But then that has to go into my Scrum system. So it's in two places. It's in my calendar, kind of as a tickler to tell me when I need to do something, and that's part of my hard landscape. But then that task, which is go to the meeting, becomes a task in workflow in my Scrum system. So the kind of my flow. So you're familiar with GTD. My GTD is a little, in a sense, simpler. When you came up with the list of things that you had on the board, like maybe the 7 lists, that's not how I operate at all. So I'll try and orient you to what I'm doing here over the course of this video, which will be a little bit longer. So feel free not to watch it all, but it'll take me a little while to explain. And also, I'm going to throw a lot of information at you, and you can ask me any questions you have. In my mind, it's all integrated. I know exactly the kind of topography and geography of my systems, and so I just kind of work inside of that. You don't know what the topography is, so some things will seem disconnected, and I know how things relate, so I'll try and give you enough information for it to be helpful. So with GTD, I have all the details. That mountain of details, like Dave Allen says, is captured in ubiquitous capture devices, UCDs. So I have several of those, and I just made sure that I've got this notebook comes with me every place, 100% of the time, unless I'm like in a store picking up some things at the grocery store. But this thing is with me either here on my desk or when I'm driving, because I do a lot of driving for my work as an interior remodeling contractor, do kitchen and bath remodels. That notebook is sitting on my console for me to jot notes down in. I also have my iPhone, and I use iPhone notes anytime. If I'm actually driving and can't take a note physically, I will tell Siri to take a note and just capture everything there. I also have a little 3x5 card wallet that I use for my wallet, but it also holds a 3x5 card. So I can whip that out at any time. So I have a set of UCDs that over the years has been able to capture everything. There's not anything it can't capture. So there's my inbox, my physical inbox, my Gmail inbox, my text message inbox, this notebook, my pocket briefcase, and then my phone notes. So over the years, when I would realize, I'm missing something, I would figure out what do I need to put into place so that I can capture that kind of thought. And so that's how that set of UCDs has grown for me. And now that's been my UCD set for probably 8 or 9 years, and it really hasn't changed because it's sufficient to what I need. So that's how I capture everything. And then so once a day I go through and look at what I've written down, make sure that anything on there that's time sensitive gets inputted into my system every day. Then there may be a long list of things that's not particularly time sensitive, and that gets either done that day if I have the time, or if I don't have that time in the evening when I process things, I do it on Saturday. So once a day I capture all of the time sensitive things. Once a week I make sure everything's processed. And so really my process is just David Allen's question, what does this mean to me? So I look at, for example, one thing that's, I don't know if you can see, but once everything is processed, I highlight it, meaning I've captured it and processed it. I don't have any more questions about it. If it's an event, it's on my calendar and put into my workflowy system as a task. There's a note here that says Lily Flag, which is the name of our pool that we're members of. And so I just noted that down because I realized, we need to pay that bill. So I just jotted that down. So then I asked myself, either in the evening, if it's time sensitive, or on Saturday, what does that mean to me? And so that I need to put that into my accounting system. But I don't pay it. My wife pays our personal bill, so I also make a note, talk to Gracie about paying that bill. And I just think, is there anything else I need to do? And once I've processed it fully and there's no other questions, it doesn't mean anything else to me, I cross it off and I'm done. So that's how I process everything from my text inbox, my notebooks, my UCD captures everything, and then I process it fully into my systems by asking myself, what does this mean to me? And then I'm done with that. So everything's captured, put into the system. I don't move things around. You say you tend to lose things that you captured to do when you move time-sensitive items around the forever calendar in your daily agenda. Okay, so let me explain how I do that without using a calendar to house. It doesn't tell me what to do. If it's a calendar item, it goes on my calendar, but it's also in my system. So that's one way, is I make sure it doesn't, I put it in my system in a certain way, but since it's calendar related and I have a separate calendar, I duplicate it. And that's how I solve that. If I'm moving it around on my calendar, it stays in the same place in my system on Workflowy, so I am reminded of it regardless, using my Scrum ceremonies. So to kind of orient you, in GTD, you have a weekly planning, can't remember what he calls it, just a weekly meeting with yourself that he recommends. That's kind of a critical component of Workflowy, of GTD. And when you do that, you ask yourself, what are your projects that are current? And then every project that's current needs to have at least one next action. Okay, that lays really well with Scrum. I don't know if you're familiar with Scrum. If you're not, go and find a YouTube video that explains, kind of a 5 or 10 minute YouTube video that explains Scrum in 5 minutes or something, and that'll kind of give you a perspective on that, so you'll understand what I'm talking about if you're not familiar with it. And Scrum is really oriented towards teams, but when you said that you're a team of one, I thought, well, maybe my systems may be helpful in some ways because I'm a team of one. Scrum is oriented towards team processes, and there's a product holder, and that's kind of the manager who decides what's important for the team to be working on given the total context. So he's talking to the client, he's talking to the technicians, he's talking to managers of the company he works for to try and figure out what's the most important things we can be working on. And that's the product holder. So in GTD terms, that's you saying, what do I need to be working on this week? Or, during your next week when you're doing your weekly planning. And then you decide what the next action is. And there's a corollary in Scrum to that, where the product holder is called grooming the product backlog. And so he's looking at all the possible things they can be doing. He's sorting kind of the big projects into a priority, and then he's making sure that they're called user stories, which would be kind of like next actions in a sense. he's deciding, okay, to get this particular piece of, say, the software that they need to produce for a gaming company that he works for, if that's what he's working on. What do I need to do to make this particular part of the component of the game work? And then he breaks that into smaller tasks like next actions. So GTD has a product holder. It's you deciding what projects do I need to work on, and the product holder grooms the list of the product backlog, and that's you saying what are the next actions I need to work on. And then in GTD, the team of technicians or the team of software writers meets together, and there's a Scrum Master who is organizing the platform for them to make sure all the things that need to happen in the meeting happen in a certain way. But basically the product holder is saying, here's the priority tasks, and then the team that's doing it is saying, well, in this next week, if you're sprint, it's called a sprint, whatever the time frame that you're orienting yourself to. And I made it a week because that laid really well with GTD weekly plan. So my sprint is a week long, and so you are the technician, of course, if you're a team of one. So you're deciding what do I think I can actually work on this week and potentially get done. And you bring those next actions in, those projects and next actions into your weekly plan. So that lays really well with GTD. But Scrum has some other features that I'll show you later on called story points. That's a huge part of my system and very helpful. But that is, so instead of moving tasks and projects around your forever calendar, what I do is I embed them in the projects and leave them there. Anything that's specifically time related, I put on Google Calendar. Or if I had a calendar in Workflowy that I looked at, I don't have any calendar in Workflowy at all. I could put it there, and then like in GTD, you need to make sure that your system includes review. So you would just need to make sure you review that calendar, and I'm sure you're already doing that. But I review my calendar in depth every week, make sure everything's in there that needs to be in there, and then every day I look at it as part of my evening processing time. So then in Scrum, you plan your sprint like in GTD, you plan your week, and then in Scrum you have what's called a daily stand-up, which is a 15-minute time-boxed meeting, which in my case would be with yourself, and you ask yourself 3 questions. One is, what did I do yesterday? In a team setting, you're keeping everybody up to date, so I debrief my day and look at what I did and process that a certain way. What am I going to do tomorrow? And the only thing you're looking at that point is your sprint plan. So like in GTD, it's your project list you currently have next actions for. That's all you look at. Because you decided at the beginning of the sprint, these are the things I'm going to focus on this week. So when it gets down to my daily task, I'm not looking at my whole list. I'm isolating it to just the things that I said I could potentially do this week. And so that's a much smaller list than my total project list. And then I just scroll through that and decide what I'm going to do. And so you can see that's how I have simplified. I don't have to track things, because once I lock it in the calendar, I may move it around, but it doesn't change where it is under my project list. So I don't lose it because it's always there in my project list. So as I'm doing my sprint planning and my daily stand-up, I see it right in front of me, and it's always there. So that's how I've solved your first problem, where you said that you tend to lose things when you're moving them around and kind of lose track of them. So I'll give you a view. Actually, let me read your second one. Second, that I'm effectively tracking those to-dos against larger outcomes, i.e. projects, to ensure I'm keeping an eye on the bigger picture and not creating any gaping holes. Sure. Okay. So again, Scrum is how I handle that. hopefully by now you've gone, and I would recommend going and just watching a short video, because what I'm going to say is going to sound like nonsense unless you kind of understand it, and that's a whole nother. I could take 5 or 10 minutes just explaining Scrum, and other people have done it better and more graphically, informatively than I could do right now. So now I assume you've watched something, so you understand Scrum. The way I handle tracking to-dos against larger outcomes is by using story points and making sure I'm working from templates in my project. So here I'll go over to my workflowy. This is my workflowy home you're looking at. I'm going to zoom out so you can kind of you can see the whole thing at one glance. It probably will be a little fuzzy on the screen, so you won't be able to read it, but this right here, hashtag in process, is what I'm currently working on, and that just means what I'm working on today specifically. That's all that means. And I can click on it and search it. And here is, I told you I have a daily stand-up where I decide what I'm going to do today. And all I look at is my things that are currently on my sprint plan list. And so here you can see, let me back out. Here's my sprint plan list. I created this on the beginning of the week. Let's see. You can see some things are done. All these crossed out things, but these are all, and I leave them in my sprint plan till the end of the week, so you can see I'll just scroll down so you can kind of get a grasp on how many there are. In fact, I'll do a count to see how many total. So there's a total of there's a total of 193 that are in my sprint nodes that have the sprint attached. So there's 193 tasks. I'm not going to get all those done because of the nature of my work in particular. It's so contingent on so many other people, inspectors coming to inspect. They may or may not call me this week. I've called in an inspection to request a framing inspection or whatever. They may call me this week or they may not, but because I know that's a possibility for this week, I include all of the tasks related to the inspection, and then the immediate tasks that the inspection will release me to do that I could potentially do. So that's a departure from sprint planning from a pure Scrum perspective, because you only put in things that you are going to do. That's the goal, is you know how much you can do because of story points, and you only bring in the number of things that your story point throughput will allow you to do. And so my story point throughput for work-related stuff specifically is about 157. And so in theory, I would only bring in 157 story points, but because if the inspector doesn't call me, I'm not going to do those story points, and that frees me up to use them to do something else. Basically, my question on Saturday when I do my sprint planning is, what do I think I could work on this week? And so that excludes all the stuff I know I can't work on, things that are part of my construction projects that are, hey, why don't you close the door and go out just a minute? Do you need something important?
Need Monty?
Nope, she's not in here, bud. Sorry, interruption. I'm in my office, but my office is at my house. So where was I? Okay, so that's what my sprint plan is the things I could do this week. So for example, if I'm at the framing stage, obviously I'm not going to be setting out plumbing fixtures. That's several weeks in the future. So even though that's a part of my project template list, I'm only looking at the things I know I could do. So that's when I create my sprint plan, that's things that I can potentially do. So if I do a story point count, there's a 758 total. And I just told you my total work related is about 157, but my total story point throughput is probably averaging around 500 to 600. So you can see, obviously, I'm not going to do everything, and I don't intend to. That's not a concern for me. I just want to have in front of me what you were talking about. I want to track those to-dos against larger outcomes to ensure I'm keeping an eye on the bigger picture and not creating any gaping holes. that's how I answer that question, is by including everything from all my projects, work related and personal, that I could work on, and then every day I'm asking the question, okay, what today? It's kind of similar to my sprint planning question. I add things into today's that I could potentially do. But again, I still have the same thing. I don't know if the inspector is going to call today, but boy, if he does, I'm going to meet him there, and that's going to release a whole batch of actions that are backlogged behind it. So every day I pull this up and I go through and I highlight things that I think I would like to do today, and I'm just picking some random stuff. And I actually hide the completed so they don't get in the way. Okay, so I do that I go through the whole list, add hashtag in process to anything I want to do, and tag it with that. And that then isolates just the things I think I can work on today. So now I just did a search for in process, much smaller list. I'm not going to get them all done, but I am, like you said, you want to keep an eye on the bigger picture. So once I've isolated this set of things I could work on today, it is by its nature, because of sprint planning, like GTD's weekly plan, I've decided the important projects from a weekly perspective, but I have all of the projects possible are right here in front of me. And so as I go through and do my sprint plan, I'm scrolling through each project. It takes me about half an hour on Saturday to scroll through and select the things I think I can work on. And I have my calendar pulled up, so I make sure I know what's on my calendar, so I make sure I include those things in for sure into my sprint plan. And then every day I look at my calendar to say, okay, today I have that one, like today at 12, I have a meeting to look at a potential new project. And so that is, that's right here. Under, I can't remember, cost analysis procedure. So that's there, and this is what I need to do this morning after I finish making this video and posting it. That's what I'll be doing. But that right there, cost analysis procedure, is a meeting which has its own agenda underneath it. There's the meeting agenda. But it's also, I'll pull this up. It's also on my calendar. Oof, it's not on my calendar. So not perfect, but I just made that plan yesterday and just hadn't gotten it. Nope, not club calendar. I want it on Barista Building Company. And that'll be about a hour and a half meeting. And okay. So actually you see in action, it did not get to my UCD, so it's not perfect. But I don't miss things. I didn't put it on there. That was an accident, to be honest. I should have been on my calendar. But it was I don't have a lot going on today, so I knew it was coming. But potentially I could miss it. I should have been noted someplace and processed. So that was a mistake for sure. But it was captured. Here's the thing, though. Even though it wasn't on my calendar, it is here, so I don't lose track of it because I knew that it was coming. So I made sure to put that on my in process. So now I have my daily plan of all the things I could work on. So this is a new project I'm going to look at. Saint is, I just signed a contract on this bath remodel yesterday, so these are the things I can start to work on after, and that was waiting to sign the contract to release. And I didn't know at the beginning of the week. I hadn't confirmed a meeting with them, but I did put these things on in case they did call and we signed a contract that would then release me to do these things. I've got some design work to do on that. I've got some closure. That's a job I just finished out. Cash, I need to do a cost analysis procedure completion. I'm developing a new company within my company. So these are all the things I can work on, and my birthday's coming up next week. Got to plan that out. So this is my. I'm not going to get all these things done. I don't care. But like you said, you just want to keep an eye on it. So these are all things I've decided I want to keep an eye on. I'll get as much done as I can, consistent with my energy and how the day plays out. But I don't lose sight of it because I look at this list several times during the day. So when I get done that meeting, when I get done with this, I know what I'm going to be doing because I'm going to jump down to this and prep for my 12 o'clock. But then when I get done that 12 o'clock meeting, I will pull this up and just scan down it and decide what to do next. And I'll be in town at that point. So I will do #T for #town, which is context. Here's all the stuff I could then do in town. So I've isolated the context to just where I am, town, or if I wanted to make some phone calls. Let's see if there's any phone calls possible. So while I'm in town driving around is when I usually make my phone calls, so I'll pull that list up. So depending on the context, I isolated it just to the things I wanted to do today, which were isolated by the things I want to work on this week, which was isolated by as the product owner, I'm constantly grooming priorities and stuff. And I talked to Gracie. With my wife, I have a meeting. I'll pull that up. I have a meeting with her once a week, and not every day, but every day I feel like I need it. So this is called unprocessed inventory. At the beginning of the week, I have a meeting with her to discuss each project and where I am and where the hang-ups are and what the bottlenecks are and if I'm struggling with something, what the struggle is, like what's holding me up. Whether I just don't want to do the work for the person because I don't like them or something, and make some decisions about that, or there may be something I don't know what to do like how to do a part of a project or something. And she kind of helps me think through resolutions to those problems. She's a lot better at that kind of thing than I am. I get stuck pretty easily, and she breaks up the logjam for me really quickly for some reason. So we have this meeting, and this was from maybe a couple days ago. We had this meeting, and this was yesterday, so I actually completed that. So I'm trying to schedule a sub for this meeting, and I'll try again today and see if it works out. But this has given me kind of an outline for generally, like you said, you just want to keep an eye on the details. This is one of the layers, is a meeting I have with my wife just to kind of keep myself oriented to the big picture and kind of sort priorities. She helps me do that. So that's how I keep an eye on everything. And so you said you're project driven, so it's not feasible to focus on only one at a time, which is certainly true of me. I've got so many irons in the fire, so I have to just track and prioritize, and I try to track and prioritize at different horizons. So I basically negotiate the situation once a week. So I decide what I think I can get done. And then as I'm looking at my project list, these are kind of personal projects right here. I'll zoom in a little bit. So this top list is, these are analysis tools. This is my 12-week year. This is Flotsam, which is just my miscellaneous one-off tasks, like stop by the grocery store or whatever. These are my flywheels. This is just Fortnite. I love Fortnite, so this is Fortnite-related stuff. My family year is our cycle of, Christmas, birthdays, anniversaries, that kind of thing. This is gardening. I have a pretty big garden. And this is ministry, some stuff I do with the church. And then these are my business-related projects. So most of them are individual homeowners. The first three letters of their name. This is a company I'm working on with another guy. And this is Barista Building Company. So this is just kind of internal things having to do with my company in particular. Not projects my company's doing, but things I want to work on in my company. And then down here at the bottom is reference. So again, I have to keep all of these in focus. So that's why I've laid out my workflowy from a project perspective as opposed to a calendar perspective. So I keep track of all my projects there, and then I don't know what you do in particular, but as a remodeling contractor, who every job's different, but as a project manager, it's kind of the same in a sense, except it's isolated to the particular trades that have to do with that job. But what I've done there is created a template. So this is my template for every project that I just copy and paste and rename it from current project workflow iteration to the 3-letter designation for the project, which is the first 3 letters of the customer's name. And then I'm going to zoom into workflows. So I just copy and paste this for every new project. There's about 6,000 nodes. I can quickly delete anything that doesn't apply. So for example, if it's not in the historic board, if they're not in a neighborhood with rules, if they've already finished the design phase, if they're not in a FEMA flood zone or slope development, I can delete those. And if, say, I'm just doing a kitchen remodel, there's not going to be excavation or footings if there's no low voltage. So I just go through and select any trades that are not going to be involved in the project and delete them. And then under each one is what you're looking at here, is the layer of a project that has to do with me as the project manager only. It's not what the framer's doing. That's another note I'll show you. It's what I have to do potentially. I don't have to do every one on every job because every job's a little different. But here I'll just scroll down so you can kind of see. So I have to tell them what to save when they're doing demo. I need to double check accessory locations with homeowner once the walls are in place so we can frame behind it so we can have something to screw into, get large fixtures on site. So this is over the years, this is developed. So pretty much everything I could possibly ever do on any project is pretty much here. About 90, 98, 99% of all the tasks related to a particular project are here. And so I already have a pre-populated template. So I kind of know what I'm going to be doing on the project, and then I just go through and just delete. I spend maybe half an hour going through and deleting anything that I don't think is going to apply, adding anything that's specific to that project that I need to add. And then, so that's what once I've done that on a project, what this project list is then, as far as keeping your eye on the ball and not losing track of everything, is embedded in each of these lists is everything that I think is related to that project. And then I review that weekly. I create the new project when I get a phone call and somebody says, hey, I'm interested in you looking at a kitchen remodel for me. So I create that as a node here with the project name. I don't do all that work of deleting everything until I get to the point of where I think I'm going to sign a contract, and then it's worth me taking the time to do that. So I'm as I go through time, I'm compacting what's kind of in my wheelhouse tighter and tighter as I go through each project, so it's more distilled what I'm looking at. It's more specific to that project, so it makes it easier. Instead of leaving all the nodes in there and having to sort through them every time, I'm deleting anything that doesn't apply. And as I go through a trade and I'm completing it, I then complete that trade, so that disappears. And so it's helping me focus my attention by just sorting the things that I really need to keep on my plate. And then I look at that once a week, add anything into my week, so that further condenses it to the things I think need to apply to this week. And then every day I further condense it to the things that I apply for the day. That all sounds complicated, but I'll give you kind of a timeline for it. I spend maybe half an hour extracting some Scrum data from the previous week and putting that into Excel where I track my story point throughput. And then I delete hashtag sprint and hashtag in process. So then I'm just left with my project lists. And then I spend maybe half an hour scrolling through, hitting alt selecting, the tasks for the week. So that's about half an hour. So I spend about an hour on Friday debriefing the previous week and planning for the next week. And then every day, usually I'll get home around between 5:30 and 6:30, and I'll spend really probably a half an hour. And I'm not just doing this. I'm going through my UCDs and making sure things are put into my list in the right place. And if something's come up that needs to be added into my sprint that I hadn't planned on, I put that into the right place, whether it's for a particular project or flotsam, or if Gracie has asked me to pick up some seeds for the garden, I add that into the gardening node and then tag it for this sprint and in process. I also tag it with hashtag found work or hashtag F, so I can track how much found work I historically have. And since I've been tracking my sprints for like 160 sprints, 160 weeks or so, I have a pretty good analysis of how much found work I'm going to have each week. It ends up being almost always roughly the same within 10 or 20 story points. So I look at it about an hour each week, and then about 30 minutes a day. I kind of debrief everything, make sure I have everything where it needs to go. And then, so that kind of, I know it sounds complicated, and it's probably taken me 36 minutes so far to explain it. But it's super natural, and it ends up doing what you're saying that you need done, which is just kind of keeping your eye on all the balls, not losing stuff, and keeping your eye on what you need to do in reference to kind of larger roles that you have. So that's how I do it. But then I end up operating for the most part from my phone. Let me turn my flashlight off here just a second. Because workflow is on my phone. So I do that in the evening, and then in the morning when I hit the ground running, I basically just pull up Workflowy. I look at my calendar and make sure I know which meetings. I set reminders for myself so I don't forget meetings I have. If I have a 12 o'clock meeting, I set an 11 o'clock alarm just to remind myself. And so that's a part of my flywheel for each day. That half an hour in the evening, I'm looking at my calendar and setting reminders for the next day to make sure I don't forget a meeting and just get too focused on something and forget I have something coming up, which I am very prone to do. But then I just pull up, I won't do it. I won't show you on the phone, but I pull up my phone, and when I get to the job, like this meeting today, let me zoom out. I can do the combination of search for the job and in process, and when I get to the job, it's all for me about focus. I lose, you've probably seen even as I make this video, my son walks in and I just completely lose where I am. That dynamic is a big part of my life. Like, it's just, I created this kind of heavy duty system that's kind of an exoskeleton, because internally I'm not organized. I'm very disorganized. It's just a bunch of like plastic balls popping around in my head, and whichever ball's in front of me is what's got my attention. And so I've created this system to deal with that, because I lose focus instantaneously and end up not doing what I need to do. So I keep this in front of me, and that's the reason I've done it in such a way that I can focus in. Like, from the overall list as thousands of tasks possible, I've isolated it to just the tasks I want to do this week, and then just the tasks I want to do today. And then once I arrive at a context, I've created my workflow in such a way that I can easily isolate at the Signor project just the things I want to do today at the project, and I can actually isolate it just at the job site by hashtag J. This is the things that I can do while I'm there, or while I'm at the computer. So that's, my whole system is created essentially to ask the question. This is actually what this whole elaborate thing is developed as an answer to the question, what should I be doing right now? because without some kind of external system, my head just starts thinking of all the things I should be doing and could be doing, and trying to sort out the priority, not from the top down like I do now, but from the bottom up. Like, here's the 75 things I'm thinking about. Which one do I think I should prioritize? I can't answer that question. And actually, my system was created, and this is where Scrum really came in really handy, is because Dave Allen in GTD makes an assumption that's not true about me. He said, if you create your project list with your weekly, meeting, and then have your next actions, just look at it. You'll know what to do. And that's absolutely, I tried doing that for years and years and years. I've used GTD since pretty thoroughly since 2006. I mean, I love it so much. But that was the big fault for me with GTD, was he made this assumption. Here, I've created this framework, and now you just need to look at your next actions. No, that does not work for me. I look at my next actions, and I don't internally prioritize. I have to create a framework to prioritize, because I don't internally just look at it and think, oh, that's the most important, biggest payoff task. I have to have some system to create a formula that lets me know what's the biggest task. It's not inside my brain, and never has been since I was a kid, and not for one split second. So that's what, for somebody who kind of internally can just look at a list, like my wife is more like this. She can just look at a list and she just sees the most important thing, and I do not see the most important thing. She processes it differently. So if you can process it internally a lot easier, then you wouldn't need the elaborate detail that I've gone to, for sure. And a lot of people wouldn't, but this is how I've answered your questions. And now that I'm 41 minutes in, I don't actually expect you to watch this all, and if you don't, that's just fine. But I thought I would answer your question in this format. So if you have any more questions, be careful. I'll answer them at length, as you can see. All right, hope this is helpful.